A grand mansion stood atop the hill, overlooking the city below, a symbol of wealth and power. From the outside, it looked perfect: manicured gardens, sparkling windows, and an air of luxury that most people could only dream of. But behind those walls, a secret was buried deep in the basement. Lily Thompson never imagined her fairy tale wedding would lead her here. She thought she had married her Prince Charming, Ethan Chambers, a millionaire known for his charm and generosity. To the world, he was the perfect husband, successful, handsome, and endlessly caring. But Lily was about to discover the terrifying truth behind his perfect smile. The first few days were blissful. Ethan showered her with gifts, romantic dinners, and promises of forever. But then, things changed. Subtly at first, he insisted on knowing her every move, who she talked to, where she went. He said it was to keep her safe, to protect her from the dangers of the outside world. She believed him, wanted to believe him. Until the day she found the door. It was in the basement, hidden behind a heavy bookshelf that Ethan never let her go near. Curiosity got the better of her. As she pulled the bookshelf aside, a cold shiver ran down her spine. The door was old, metal, and locked tight. There were scratches on the handle, as if someone had tried desperately to get out. She heard noises, faint, almost ghostly whispers. She pressed her ear to the door, her heart racing. Was someone crying? Before she could think, a hand clamped down on her shoulder. She spun around, her heart leaping to her throat. Ethan's face was calm, too calm. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I told you to stay away from the basement, Lily." His voice was low, dangerous. In that moment, Lily realized she didn't know the man she had married. And she was trapped. The days blurred together. Ethan took her phone, cut off her contact with the outside world. The mansion became her prison, each room echoing with her loneliness. Every night, she heard the whispers from the basement, growing louder, more desperate. Who was down there? Why did Ethan keep that door locked? One night, when Ethan was away on a business trip, Lily found a way. A forgotten phone hidden in an old drawer. Her hands trembled as she dialed the only number she could remember, her best friend's. The line rang once, twice, then someone picked up. "Hello? Lily, is that you?" Lily's voice cracked with fear. "Please, help me, he's keeping me here. I don't know what he'll do when he finds out I called." The call abruptly cut off. Behind her, she heard the familiar click of the basement door opening. She turned slowly, her blood turning to ice. Ethan stood there, his face a mask of cold fury. "Who did you call, Lily?" Everything went dark. Who was in the basement? What was Ethan hiding? And would Lily ever escape? The answers would shock everyone. The sun was setting behind the sprawling estate, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured gardens. The mansion stood like a fortress atop the hill, its grand architecture a testament to wealth and power. To anyone looking from the outside, it was the picture of luxury. But Lily Thompson was learning that even the most beautiful prisons had golden bars. She stood by the window of her bedroom, no, her cage, watching the world outside grow darker. The city lights flickered in the distance, a reminder of the life she once had. A life filled with laughter, freedom, and friends. Now, those days felt like a distant dream. All because she fell in love with a man who seemed too perfect to be real. Ethan Chambers. The man who had swept her off her feet with his charm and wealth. He was everything every woman dreamed of, tall, handsome, and endlessly generous. He had a smile that could disarm anyone and eyes that sparkled with intelligence and confidence. He was known as a successful entrepreneur, a philanthropist who donated millions to charity, and a man who could do no wrong in the public eye. Their meeting had been like a scene from a movie. It was at a charity gala where Ethan was the guest of honor. Lily remembered how he moved through the crowd, commanding attention effortlessly. She had been just another face in the audience, but when their eyes met, she felt an electric spark. He approached her with that $1,000,000 smile and introduced himself as if she was the most important person in the room. From that night on, her life became a whirlwind of romance and excitement. Candlelit dinners at the city's finest restaurants, weekend getaways on his private yacht, and lavish gifts that made her feel like a princess. Ethan was attentive, affectionate, and seemed to know her every desire before she even voiced it. When he proposed, it was a fairy tale come true. On one knee under the stars, with a diamond ring that sparkled brighter than the night sky. His words were sweet, promising her a life of happiness and love. Tears of joy had streamed down her face as she said yes, believing she was the luckiest woman in the world. Their wedding was a grand event, the talk of the town. Celebrities, politicians, and business tycoons gathered to witness the union of the perfect couple. The ceremony was held in the gardens of the mansion, adorned with white roses and twinkling lights. They danced under the moonlight, and Ethan's gaze never left hers. His words echoed in her heart, "Forever, my love. I will protect you, always." But forever came with conditions. It started small. He wanted to know where she was at all times, who she was with, and what she was doing. At first, Lily thought it was sweet, a sign of how much he cared. But the questions became more frequent, more demanding. He would call her several times a day, his voice gentle but firm, asking why she hadn't answered sooner. Then, the isolation began. He discouraged her from meeting her friends, saying they were a bad influence. He convinced her to quit her job, insisting that he could provide for her and that she didn't need to work. "I want to take care of you," he would say, his eyes sincere. "You deserve the best." She believed him. She wanted to believe him. But the walls of the mansion grew higher, and the rooms felt colder. Lily found herself alone more often than not, surrounded by luxury but devoid of freedom. The once enchanting mansion now felt like a gilded cage. She realized she knew very little about Ethan. Despite his charm and openness, he never talked about his past. Whenever she asked about his family, he would brush it off with a smile, saying they were distant and uninterested in his life. He had no close friends, only business associates who were more like loyal followers. There were no pictures of him as a child, no memorabilia from his youth. It was as if his life began the moment he became rich. It felt strange, but every time she tried to dig deeper, he would skillfully change the subject, his voice smooth and persuasive. And then there was the basement. The one place in the mansion that Ethan forbade her to go. "There's nothing down there but old junk," he would say, his tone casual but his eyes cold. "It's not safe. Promise me you'll never go down there." She promised. But the more she was told to stay away, the more her curiosity grew. Especially when she started hearing the whispers. The fairy tale was crumbling, and Lily was beginning to see the cracks beneath the perfect facade. Who was the man she married? And what dark secrets did the basement hold? Little did she know, her search for answers would lead her to the most terrifying discovery of her life. The mansion was beautiful, but it was also eerily quiet. Too quiet. Days blended into nights with a monotonous rhythm that echoed through the empty halls. Lily would wander from room to room, her footsteps muffled by the plush carpets, her reflection distorted in the grand mirrors that lined the walls. It felt like the mansion was watching her, keeping her secrets as faithfully as its master. Ethan's behavior had changed. It was subtle at first, little things she tried to brush off. He would stare at her, his gaze lingering just a little too long, his expression unreadable. He began locking doors. Rooms she used to freely explore were now off limits. When she asked, he smiled, his charm as disarming as ever. "Just some renovations, my love. I want everything to be perfect for you." She tried to believe him, tried to ignore the unease growing in her chest. But then, the rules started. No visitors without my permission. No leaving the mansion grounds without me. And the one that sent chills down her spine: never go near the basement. She remembered the way his voice dropped when he said it, cold and commanding, a stark contrast to his usual loving tone. His eyes had darkened, his jaw clenched. In that moment, the man who had once been her Prince Charming looked more like a stranger. Lily tried to rationalize his behavior. Maybe he was just overprotective. Maybe he loved her so much that he was afraid of losing her. But even as she tried to convince herself, the mansion's silence seemed to whisper the truth: she was a prisoner. The whispers started a week later. They were faint, barely more than a murmur, drifting up from the basement late at night. At first, Lily thought she was imagining it, just her mind playing tricks on her in the vast, empty mansion. But the whispers grew more distinct, echoing through the hallways like a ghostly wail. She lay awake in bed, her heart pounding, straining to hear the words. It sounded like crying, pleading, but the voice was too muffled to make out. Goosebumps prickled her skin, and she pulled the blankets tighter around herself, trying to shut out the haunting sounds. The next morning, she tried to confront Ethan about it. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Ethan, I heard something last night. From the basement, it sounded like someone was crying." His reaction was instant. His body stiffened, his eyes flashed with anger before he quickly masked it with a smile. "You must have been dreaming, sweetheart. There's nothing down there but old furniture and dust." She wanted to believe him, but his voice was too tight, his smile too forced. Days passed, and the whispers continued, sometimes turning into soft, agonized wails that echoed through the stillness of the night. Lily grew restless, paranoia creeping into her thoughts. She started noticing other things too. Ethan's sudden disappearances. He would leave without warning, sometimes for days, his excuses vague and hurried. He always returned with a bouquet of flowers and a charming apology, but he never explained where he went. Then there were the locked doors. Rooms that had once been open were now sealed shut, the keys nowhere to be found. When she asked, he simply shrugged, his eyes cold. "You don't need to worry about those rooms. They're off limits." The final straw came one afternoon when she stumbled upon a box of photographs hidden in the back of a closet. They were pictures of Ethan with a woman Lily didn't recognize, beautiful, smiling, her eyes full of life. The woman wore the same necklace Ethan had gifted Lily on their wedding day. Lily's blood ran cold. Who was she? And why had Ethan never mentioned her? She confronted him that evening, her voice trembling. "Who is she, Ethan? The woman in the photos?" His face darkened, his eyes turning cold as ice. "That's none of your concern." "But, you gave me her necklace. Why didn't you tell me?" His jaw tightened, and for a moment, Lily saw a flicker of something she'd never seen before, fear. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by cold fury. "Drop it, Lily. Some things are better left buried." He walked out, slamming the door behind him, leaving her standing there, shaken and confused. She knew then that he was hiding something terrifying. That night, the whispers were louder than ever, echoing through the mansion like a chorus of lost souls. Lily couldn't take it anymore. She had to know the truth. She had to see what was behind that basement door. Ignoring the cold dread pooling in her stomach, she crept down the stairs, each step creaking under her weight. Her heart pounded as she reached the basement door, the metal handle cold under her fingers. She tried to turn it, but it was locked, just as she had expected. But desperation made her bold. She remembered the box of old keys she had found in one of the locked rooms upstairs. She ran back up, her heart racing, and fumbled through the keys until she found one that looked old and rusted. Her hands trembled as she slid the key into the lock, praying it would fit. It did. The door creaked open, revealing a darkness so thick it felt alive. The air was cold and stale, carrying a faint, metallic smell. She stepped inside, her breath fogging in the icy air. Her eyes adjusted slowly, revealing shadows that twisted and danced in the dim light. Her heart thudded as she moved deeper into the room, her footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. Then she saw it. In the corner, chained to the wall, was a woman. Her hair was matted, her body frail, her eyes hollow and haunted. She looked up as Lily approached, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Help me." Lily stumbled back, her heart racing. The woman's face was familiar, too familiar. She was the woman from the photographs. The woman who wore Lily's necklace first. The whispers were real. The basement was a prison. And Ethan was not the man she thought he was. Her blood ran cold as the truth sank in. She wasn't Ethan's first wife, and if she didn't find a way out, she wouldn't be his last. Lily's heart raced as she stumbled back from the woman chained to the wall. Her mind reeled, struggling to process the horror in front of her. How long had she been down here? Who was she? But deep down, Lily already knew. This was the woman from the photographs, the woman who wore the necklace before her. The woman Ethan never spoke of. The woman who was supposed to be dead. Panic surged through her veins as she backed away, her eyes never leaving the haunted figure before her. The woman's voice was weak, barely more than a whisper. "Please, don't leave me here." Her hollow eyes glistened with tears, desperation etched into every line on her face. Lily's breath hitched. She couldn't leave her here. She wouldn't. But before she could take another step, the door slammed shut behind her, echoing through the cold, dark room. She spun around, her heart plummeting as she saw him. Ethan stood in the doorway, his face shrouded in shadow, his eyes cold and unyielding. Gone was the charming smile, the soft words. In its place was a mask of fury, a darkness she had never seen before. His voice was low, dangerous. "I told you to stay away from the basement." Lily's knees trembled, but she stood her ground, forcing herself to meet his icy gaze. "Who is she, Ethan? Why is she down here?" Her voice wavered, but she refused to back down. "What did you do to her?" He stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. "She was a mistake. A mistake I tried to bury." His eyes flicked to the chained woman, his expression cold. "She tried to leave. Tried to take what was mine. I couldn't let that happen." Lily's blood ran cold. The man she had loved, the man who had promised to protect her, was a monster. A monster who would do anything to keep his secrets hidden. She glanced at the woman, who was now sobbing softly, her body shaking with fear. Anger surged within Lily, igniting a courage she didn't know she possessed. "You did this to her? You kept her down here, like an animal?" Her voice was shaking with rage. "You're a monster, Ethan." His eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a cold, cruel smile. "And yet, you married me." The truth hit her like a punch to the gut. She had fallen for his charm, his lies. She had walked willingly into his trap. But she wouldn't let him break her. Not like he broke the woman chained to the wall. She took a step back, her eyes never leaving him. "I'm leaving. I'm not staying here another minute." He laughed, the sound echoing through the cold, empty room. "Leave? You really think I'll let you walk out of here after what you've seen?" He moved closer, his face contorting with rage. "You belong to me, Lily. Just like she did. Just like she still does." Lily's blood turned to ice. He wasn't just controlling, he was obsessed. Possessive. Dangerous. She had to get out of here, now. She darted towards the door, her heart pounding, but Ethan was faster. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her skin as he pulled her back. She struggled, kicking and clawing, but his grip was ironclad. His voice was a low growl. "You're not going anywhere." Desperation took over. Lily swung her arm, her fist connecting with his face. He stumbled back, momentarily stunned, and she took her chance. She bolted for the stairs, her feet flying across the cold, concrete floor. Her heart raced, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she reached the door and flung it open. But Ethan was right behind her. His footsteps thundered up the stairs, his rage palpable. "Lily!" His voice was a roar of fury. "You can't escape me." She ran through the mansion, the once beautiful rooms now twisted and menacing in the shadows. She could hear him behind her, his footsteps echoing off the marble floors, his voice dark and vengeful. "You think you can leave me? After everything I've given you? You're mine, Lily. Mine." Her body was running on pure adrenaline, her legs burning as she sprinted towards the front door. She reached for the handle, her fingers trembling, but the door wouldn't budge. It was locked. Panic surged through her as she fumbled with the locks, her fingers shaking. She could hear him getting closer, his footsteps heavy and furious. She had seconds, maybe less. She turned and ran down the hallway, her mind racing. There had to be another way out. A window, a back door, anything. But every door she tried was locked, every window sealed shut. It was a prison, and she was trapped. His voice echoed through the halls, cold and mocking. "There's no escape, Lily. You'll never leave me. Not alive." Terror clawed at her chest as she ducked into a room, slamming the door behind her. She pressed her back against the wood, her heart pounding as she listened to his footsteps outside. He was searching for her, hunting her. She glanced around the room, her eyes wild with fear. It was one of the guest rooms, the windows covered with heavy drapes. She ran to the window, throwing back the curtains, but the glass was reinforced, unbreakable. She was trapped. His voice was closer now, just outside the door. "You can't hide from me, Lily. You belong to me." Tears streamed down her face as she looked around the room, desperately searching for anything she could use to defend herself. Her eyes landed on a heavy vase on the dresser. She grabbed it, holding it tightly, her hands shaking. The door burst open, slamming against the wall as Ethan stepped inside, his face twisted with rage. His eyes locked on her, his lips curling into a cruel smile. End of the line. Lily's grip tightened on the vase, her heart pounding. She wouldn't go down without a fight. Not after everything he had done. Not after what she had seen. Ethan took a step towards her, his movements slow, deliberate. "You should have listened, Lily. You should have stayed out of the basement." Her eyes burned with fury. "You're a monster. I'll never be yours." His smile faded, his eyes darkening. Then you'll be no one's. He lunged at her, his hands reaching for her throat. But Lily was ready. She swung the vase with all her strength, the heavy porcelain smashing into his head. Ethan stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock before he crumpled to the floor. Lily stood over his motionless body, her chest heaving, tears streaming down her face. She had to get out of here. She had to get help. But as she turned to leave, Ethan's hand shot out, grabbing her ankle. His eyes burned with hatred. "You're not leaving me, not alive." Lily screamed, her body twisting as she fought to break free. She had to survive. She had to escape. Before it was too late. Lily's scream echoed through the mansion as Ethan's grip tightened around her ankle, his eyes burning with a terrifying rage. She kicked frantically, her heel connecting with his face, and he howled in pain, his grip loosening just enough for her to break free. She scrambled to her feet, her body trembling, her heart pounding as she ran down the hallway. The house seemed to close in on her, the shadows twisting and reaching for her like skeletal fingers. She could hear Ethan behind her, his footsteps heavy and determined, his voice echoing off the walls. "You can't escape, Lily. You're mine." Her mind raced, desperation clouding her thoughts. There was only one place left to go. The basement. She flew down the stairs, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the keys she had used before. It slid into the lock, and the door creaked open, revealing the dark, cold room where she had found the chain woman. The woman's head snapped up as Lily rushed inside, her eyes wide with fear. "He's coming, he'll kill us both." Her voice was hoarse, broken from years of crying for help that never came. Lily's chest tightened. She couldn't leave her here. Not after everything she had been through. "We're getting out of here. Both of us." She ran to the chains, her fingers trembling as she tried to break them, but they were solid, unyielding. Footsteps thundered down the stairs. Ethan's voice was closer now, low and furious. "I warned you, Lily. You couldn't just stay out of it. Now you'll end up just like her." Panic surged through Lily as she looked around the room, her eyes landing on a set of rusty tools piled in the corner. She grabbed a heavy metal bolt cutter, her hands shaking as she raced back to the woman. She squeezed the handles, her muscles straining as the metal creaked and snapped. The chains fell away, clattering to the floor. The woman looked up at her, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I'd die down here." Her voice broke, raw with pain and gratitude. Lily pulled her to her feet, supporting her frail body as they stumbled towards the door. But Ethan was there, blocking their path, his eyes blazing with fury. "You're not going anywhere." His face twisted with rage as he lunged at Lily, his hands reaching for her throat. But the woman moved faster. With a strength Lily didn't know she had, she grabbed the bolt cutter and swung it at Ethan, the metal connecting with his arm. He screamed, stumbling back, clutching his bleeding wound. His eyes widened with shock, his confidence shattered. For the first time, Lily saw fear flicker across his face. You can't do this. I own you." The woman's voice was cold, unrecognizable. "Not anymore." She stepped forward, her body trembling but her eyes burning with a fierce determination. "You took everything from me. My life, my freedom, but not anymore." Ethan's face paled as he backed away, his body trembling. I loved you. I did this for us, for our future." The woman's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. "You did this for yourself. To control me. To own me. But you never loved me. You don't know how." She turned to Lily, her eyes softening. "You saved me, now we save ourselves." Together, they moved towards him, their steps in sync. Ethan's back hit the wall, his body shaking as he realized he was cornered. "Please, please don't." His voice was a whimper, the powerful man now reduced to a coward. Lily's eyes were cold, unyielding. "You were right about one thing, Ethan. Some things are better left buried." She grabbed the chains from the floor, her hands steady as she wrapped them around his wrists, binding him to the wall just as he had done to his first wife. Ethan's screams echoed through the basement as the woman locked the chains, her hands shaking but her resolve unbroken. "You'll never hurt anyone again." They turned to leave, the sound of Ethan's cries fading behind them. But before they reached the door, the woman paused, her eyes narrowing. She walked back to him, her voice low and fierce. "You took my life, my name, my freedom. But you didn't take my strength. I survived you." Ethan's face twisted with fear, his body shaking as he realized his reign of terror was over. "Don't, please, don't leave me here." The woman's eyes were cold as ice. "You left me here. Now it's your turn." She turned away, her body straightening, her spirit unbroken. Lily followed her up the stairs, her heart pounding, her body trembling. They stepped out into the sunlight, the cold air filling their lungs, freedom washing over them like a wave. The nightmare was over. They were free. But as they walked away, Ethan's screams echoed from the basement, his voice growing weaker, until it was silent. The mansion stood on the hill, dark and cold, its secrets finally revealed. And in the shadows of the basement, the monster who once controlled everything was left alone, in the prison he built himself. The sun was rising, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold as Lily and the woman walked away from the mansion, their bodies weary but their spirits unbroken. They didn't look back. There was nothing left for them in that house of horrors. Lily glanced at the woman beside her, her heart aching for all she had endured. "What's your name?" she asked softly, realizing she didn't even know the identity of the woman who had saved her life. The woman looked up, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of pain and resilience. Her voice was a whisper, fragile yet filled with strength. "Isabella. My name is Isabella." The name hung in the air, heavy with sorrow and hope. The name of a woman who had been erased, buried under lies and cruelty. But now, she was free, her name restored, her story no longer silenced. Lily reached out, taking Isabella's hand, her grip firm and comforting. "You're safe now. He can't hurt you anymore." Her voice wavered, emotion thick in her throat. "We're free." Isabella's lips trembled, tears streaming down her face. She looked back at the mansion, her prison for so many years, and then at Lily. Her voice was soft, but unyielding. "Because of you. You saved me." Lily shook her head, her eyes brimming with tears. "No, we saved each other." They walked away together, their hands clasped, their hearts healing. They were survivors. They were free. The mansion loomed behind them, cold and empty, its dark secrets echoing through the halls. In the basement, Ethan's screams had faded, replaced by the haunting silence of a man trapped by his own sins. His empire of lies had crumbled, his power shattered by the very women he tried to break. Justice had been served. Not by the law, but by the truth. The truth that could no longer be hidden. A few days later, news of Ethan Chambers' disappearance shook the city. Reporters gathered outside the mansion, their cameras flashing, their voices echoing with questions. Where was the millionaire who had everything? Why had he vanished without a trace? Lily watched the news from a safe distance, her identity protected, her freedom secured. She and Isabella had started over, their lives rebuilt from the ashes of his deception. They were no longer victims. They were warriors. Survivors. She turned off the television, her heart finally at peace. Ethan's empire was gone, his legacy tainted by the truth. But his story wasn't over. It was just beginning. She glanced at Isabella, who was smiling for the first time in years, her eyes sparkling with hope. Together, they would rebuild their lives. Together, they would heal. They were free. But Ethan was not. His prison was the very mansion he built. His punishment was the silence, the darkness, the cold emptiness of his own twisted mind. And no one would come looking for him. As the sun set, painting the sky with golden hues, Lily whispered a silent prayer for the woman she used to be, the woman who believed in fairy tales and happy endings. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, braver, unbreakable. She turned to Isabella, her heart full of hope. "Let's go home." And together, they walked away, leaving the past behind, stepping into a future where they controlled their own destiny. This is not just a story about survival. It's a story about breaking free from the chains of control and fear. It's about finding the strength to fight back, to reclaim your life, and to help others find their way to freedom. What would you have done if you were in Lily's shoes? Would you have had the courage to face the truth? To confront the monster behind the mask? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful tales of resilience and justice. Because sometimes, the scariest monsters are the ones who hide behind the perfect smile. And sometimes, the greatest strength comes from those who refuse to be silenced. Would you have the courage to fight back? Let us know below.